So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Workbar Live. My name is Chelsea Hildreth from Workbar. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Jeneé Osterheldt from the Boston Globe today. She'll be speaking to you today about when speaking the truth to power makes you the bad guy. First, a little bit about Jeneé. Jeneé is the culture columnist for the Boston Globe and a 2017 Harvard University Nieman Fellow. Jeneé believes in the power of visual and representational justice and the role the arts play in shaping a more just system and facilitating dialogue and healing. As a culture columnist, she often covers identity and social justice through the lens of the arts, pop culture, and politics. Sometimes this means writing about Cardi B and the liberation of Black womanhood. Sometimes this means exploring who gets to define what counts as art. And sometimes it means exploring the nasty reality of lynch culture or writing about sexism so pervasive and violent that women have to text each other when we get home. And I know every woman on here knows what that feels like. Just a note for our guests, if you have any questions for Jeneé throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat box. I'll make sure to get them at the end, but we're just gonna roll through everything for now. So Jeneé, thank you again so much for being with us today. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself, how you got where you are today, because what you do is amazing.
Thank you. That's such a big question. Well, I was and am still a nerd. I was an early reader and an early writer. I was reading pretty well by the time I was in kindergarten and into chapter books, like in second grade, and already trying to write poems. Mm-hmm. So in the 90s, hip hop magazines were really big. So I wanted to be like Dream Hampton and Danielle Smith, who were these really amazing Black women journalists. Many people today know Dream Hampton because she's the one who did the documentary exposing R. Kelly. And she does amazing work. She always has, but she started out at the Village Voice and Source and Vibe. And I just wanted to be like that. I felt very seen and very like, oh wow, somebody speaks the language I speak, and they don't edit themselves, and they're very hip hop, and I'm so into this. And I went to college at Norfolk State University, which is a historically Black college, and we had a journalism program. We didn't really have a magazine writing program. And I kind of got pushed into newspapers, which, to be honest, was not fabulous to me. Like, I had this dream of living in New York and having this cool loft and having a dog and
right.
This very hip hop glam lifestyle, not writing for a newspaper. But that's what happened. I ended up writing for the school paper and becoming the student life editor. I was very much protesting cafeteria food and wanting more vegetarian options, and books, yelling about bookstore prices, and just, even abdicating back then. It was just a less informed me. So learning as I go. And honestly, I still feel like most of us are learning as we go.
Absolutely.
What I always say is, the minute you think you know it all, you should probably just quit. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and I still fly by the seat of my pants on fire, learning new things. So I got this great internship, and it took me to California and Minneapolis and Kansas City, and I wrote full-time in all of those newspapers. And then I was offered a job, and I had a choice. I could go back to the DC area and get into the manager trainee program at J. Crew. I'm a J. Crew alumni. Or I could go work at this newspaper in the Midwest. And I chose the Midwest. I didn't want to go back to the mall. So I built a career there, and I became a columnist very young. It started off as a nightlife column, which who at 22 would say no to a nightlife column? The thing is, I wasn't just doing a nightlife column, and part of this is age. When you're young, you feel so lucky to have an opportunity. And especially as a young Black woman, I felt especially lucky. So, they had me writing a nightlife column, writing for the fashion page, writing for the kids page, covering, doing all the stuff the music writer didn't want to do. But it was the music writer that helped me get a job. So I was happy to do it. He's the one who told them, y'all need to hire her. But it was I was doing several jobs and making less than $30,000. And for a couple of years, my column got so big, my nightlife column got so big that our publisher called me in his office and said, you need to make a decision. We can either cultivate you as a columnist and you can write about more serious topics outside of nightlife, or you go full pop culture, music, fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really scared of being a columnist because I had already gotten hate mail even as an intern. And I knew that as a columnist, it was worse because it's like your face is out there, your life is out there. But a whole bunch of editors really encouraged me to try. So I wrote some practice columns and they published them.
That's awesome.
And it is, but it isn't, because one of them was totally me thinking that I was like Carrie Bradshaw and writing about something I should not have written about a guy and how he played me, and it caused all kind of personal drama. But you know, you learn as you go. Like I said,
Right. I was gonna say, back to your point.
you learn as you go. You make mistakes. You figure it out. And so by the age of 28, I was an anchor columnist at a top 50 newspaper as a young Black woman, and it was a great time. It was just also a really hard time because I was still learning and growing, and I realized very quickly how much people hate to see any journalist speak truth to power and stand up to institutions, but especially a woman journalist, and doubly, triply, quadruply, especially a Black woman journalist. And you know, it escalated quite quickly. And then about 10 years ago, well, I guess it was like 8 years ago, when Trayvon Martin was killed, that's when a very big pivot happened in my work, and in the people already hated me, but then they really, really decided they hated me. That's when the death threats started and things like that. So, I mean, that's, I guess, like a long-winded way of saying I really worked hard and tried to love the craft and critique the craft, and listen to my editors, and take the opportunities that I got. And even when those institutions gave me opportunities, I still wasn't paid as well as the other people with those opportunities, or advertised or sponsored like those people. And because of how hierarchical this industry can be, I could never get back home to DC, Virginia. Like, those institutions wouldn't even take me seriously. They wanted me to take lesser jobs than what I had and start over. And it wasn't until I went to Harvard and got the Nieman and got Harvard behind my name that other companies even started paying attention to me, which is hilarious because my work hadn't changed. It was the same.
Right.
It's just suddenly I had prestige attached to my name, which it just proves how messed up all of our various systems are.
Yeah, of course. And how long have you been with the Globe?
I've been with the Globe for almost 2 years, literally in 2 weeks will be my 2-year anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And I've been in the business for almost 18 years.
Wow. Well, again, thank you for sharing. We are very honored to have you here with us today. So, I mean, let's just jump right into it. So based on, everything that you said, your background, your history, everything, how do you speak truth to power? And what do you think it is that prevents many of us from speaking truth to those in power?
Fear. I think what prevents so many of us, including me, because even though it's my job and I do it a lot, everyone's like, oh, you're so brave. There's a lot of things that it takes me a long time to finally say. And I think it's fear. It's groupthink. It's having to unlearn all of the things we've been taught, especially as women and them and queer folk. I think when you are marginalized and kind of erased in history and in the classroom, that carries over to the workplace and to the world. So I think in so many ways we shrink ourselves and try not to disrupt things, because so many of us learned at home or at elementary school, very young, I don't know many women who as girls didn't experience when you raise your hand and talk, it's like they call the boys first, or you're causing trouble. Like, why are you so sassy? You're being sassy. Someone else says it and it's like totally assertive and strong, but you're being sassy and talking back. So I think people don't understand how over time that affects you. It makes you talk less. It makes you scared to speak up or afraid of repercussions. In corporate spaces, I feel like if you are of any of those marginalized communities, the minute they give you a job, they make you feel like you need them and they don't need you. So if you step out of line in any way, you will get in trouble. But if, say, a white man ally were to amplify you, then that would be helpful. And I think that all leads to a fear of doing it on your own and speaking out. And for me, how I do it, despite everything I've been through and all the ways in which people have tried to silence me, is I think about Zora Neale Hurston. And she said, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And it's so true. And it's not just true that they'll kill you, it's that silence doesn't serve you. It hurts you, it hurts your spirit, it hurts your mind, it hurts your heart. And it's just not something you want to carry with yourself. And when I was at the height of being trolled and having like actual death threats and men calling my phone and like masturbating and just all types of horrible things. Yeah. It's not like I didn't cry. I cried. Like everyone's like, oh, you're so strong, you're so fearless. I'm not fearless. I'm scared a lot. But it's the pushing through. It's the getting back up again. It's this is what you want. You want me to shrink. You want me to not talk. And I'm not going to let you win that way. Like I know that what I do matters, even if it's just to one person out there. I know that it's getting through to someone. And just like Dream and Danielle and these names I say that sometimes people don't know, but they should know, they all got through to me. And I want to hold that space and do my due diligence. I feel it's my mission.
Awesome. Wow. And like coming from that and everything you said, how can businesses encourage a culture where the leaders listen and the employees feel comfortable speaking up? I know we've been talking about this a lot in our company. I'm sure it's everywhere now.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, we're having our own reckoning in the journalism industry. And I think that workplaces have to get, first of all, everyone has to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when I say supremacy, people just think racism. And it's like, supremacy is racism. It's also sexism. It's also xenophobia. It's also homophobia. Like, supremacy is the root of all of these things. And it's the framework on which this country was built. And when the country is built on faulty framework, you've got to be just willfully ignorant to think that everything built on top of it isn't also on faulty framework of some sort. And I try to tell you, it's really like we're all standing under this like cloud full of isms.
Right.
And if you're in America, no matter what color you are, what identity you are, what God you pray to, you have been dampened by that cloud. Like we all are various levels of wet under that cloud of supremacy. So it's like everyone has to get used to being uncomfortable and challenge themselves to do the work, to take those unconscious bias tests and trainings and figure out ways in which they can be better. Like the revolution is 4 8-legged spiders and we need all of the legs to do their work. And that's from like social media posts and hashtags that people think don't make a difference, but absolutely do, to actual initiatives, policy, and reframing. And I think the more companies get less defensive and are have more grace, like if someone like you were to say, hey, this thing happened to me, it's important that people create a space of listening versus that didn't happen. They didn't mean it that way. Well, they never treated me that way. Right. Those are all toxic microaggressions and ways of silencing people. Like there needs to be corporate culture that says, we hear you, we're listening, and there's a process in place to solve for these problems. There are correctives. And it can't just be like, we're gonna hire this officer or hire this director who handles all of the diversity issues or homophobia, like anything that falls under those umbrellas. It's everybody's work. when you make it one person's job, nothing gets done. When it comes to things like diversity and sexism and all of the problems that are rooted in supremacy. It's not one person's job to be the officer of that and director of that, because that gives permission to all the other leadership to say, oh, well, that person's going to fix that. And that happened at the MFA. And they hired this one awesome woman who does beautiful work, but she can't be expected to fix an institution. Everyone in the institution has to be involved. And they hired her, and bad things still happen because she can't do it all. Like, no one person can do it all.
Yeah, I think you sent out a tweet about that, and I thought it spoke to me. I think you sent it out last week, and I thought this one tweet kind of encompasses everything. So I definitely encourage everyone to go look at Jenee's Twitter. I'll send it in the follow-up.
Sometimes, I'm sorry.
I know, I loved it. I was like, no, this one tweet kind of encompasses where we're at right now about diversity and culture and change. So moving on. I know you talked about it a little bit before, but how have you experienced being gaslit in your life and your career? Maybe if you could dive into a couple more specific examples, if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And what have you done about them to overcome those scenarios?
So when I was an intern, I got my first piece of hate mail, and the person kept calling me girl. And for Black people, if you get called boy or girl and you're grown, it's very, it's rooted in like slave talk. And what's so crazy is when I told someone about it, they were like, oh, it's not a big deal. Everybody gets hate mail. And that happened to me for years. Like, I got hired, and that same person actually wrote me when I got hired and would leave voicemails and emails and always do that. And when I would try to tell people about these things, they'd be like, that's terrible, but you know, it happens to everybody. You'll be okay. I had an entire alternative weekly spin print space writing whole essays on how I must have been an affirmative action hire and I didn't deserve to have my job. The editor of that alternative weekly used her letter from the editor space to literally take me down. And everyone was like, oh, well, they talk bad about all the journalists here. And I was like, no, like, not this obsessively. There's an extra layer on top of this that has to do very much with race, because they took shots at us as an institution and a couple of writers, but not that voraciously and obsessively and year after year, you know, month after month, my name, and always attacking me and attaching my work to like who I must have known to have got my job or how it must have happened. And when you try to point out that something is racist and people are like, oh, that person's delightful, they didn't mean it that way. Or someone said something sexist to me once and the response was, oh, he says things like that to everybody. That doesn't make it right. And for years, I internalized this pain and just thought, well, I guess if it's not a big deal and everyone else is saying like, oh, it's just like what happens to these other people, even though it's not, I should just like keep tucking it away in my spirit. And it led to me having like a real breakdown, like after like a decade of internalizing this pain and having people I work with like leak information about me that wasn't even true, and having like actual other institutions attacking me and people saying things about me on radio stations in this one little city.
Right.
I just, I had a breakdown, and I was talking to a therapist and she said, you're in an abusive relationship with your work. Like, so I had to kind of recreate boundaries, even with readers who like my work. It's just, I can't put myself through what opening all of the mail, email, and voicemails does, because I can't sort out who's saying something nice to me versus the hundreds of people who are saying racist, sexist, nasty things. Because I hate to like say it, but more people take time to send you ugly notes than those that take time to say, hey, good job.
Right.
So I just had to stop allowing that entitlement to my space and my spirit. But The thing that's different about Boston and Kansas City is in Kansas City, it was aggressive. Like all that stuff I just described, that's aggressive. Like death threats, someone masturbating on my phone, like all that stuff is like, we called the police once and the police showed up and said, well, what did you write? That was the officer's response. Well, what did you write? Not, I'm so sorry someone wants to kill you. Like, what did you do to deserve this death threat?
Right.
And I'm sitting there in Kansas City like, wow, he really doesn't want to protect me at all. He's like so not into the idea that I need help. When I let them hear not police, but let someone hear what happened with the masturbation on my voicemail, they were like, oh, we don't know what we could do because it's a blocked call. There's lots of things you can do. I've seen people have threats from blocked calls. You call someone to help figure out who's doing this.
Right.
And it's insane. But the thing that's different about Boston is I haven't had my life threatened in the last 2 years. That's great. Hallelujah.
I hear that.
Someone did somehow get a hold of my personal cell phone number within my first 3 months here and called from a blocked number. And I was very scared. But the thing that's different here, that's my dog drinking water, if you hear that.
Yes, Jeneé has a very cute boxer.
Yes, I have a boxer. She is living her best life. She's staying hydrated and trying to mind her business this morning. Here, it's not that people want to kill me or rape me or do all of the bad things that people wanted to do in Kansas City. Here is like being covered in mosquito bites and itching all the time because the racism is so insidious. It's things like, oh, I didn't notice you because your hair is different. Well, my coworker Heather changes her hair and everyone knows who she is. When you tell me that you didn't recognize me because my hair is different, it tells me you've never bothered to see my face. You just look for the identifiably Black girl. I had a colleague one time say that they'd rather me not put the N-word in my column as it relates to me explaining something racist that happened because their son needed to be able to read the paper. And it's like, your white son needs to be able to safely read the paper, but you've never complained about our coverage of rape and sex trafficking and murder. Just this word that would require you to talk about racism. I've been called the Black writer. Jeneé covers the Black things. And it's like, is that what I do? But it's just, it's like literally being covered in mosquito bites all the time. It's just like a constant itching and we don't even need to talk about just outside of work life in Boston, but it's just,
Right.
it's like being covered in mosquito bites. It's like itching all the time and people feeling entitled to you and also disparaging you for just doing your job.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing both of those stories with us. It's hard to hear and you're very brave. So as a journalist, your words help to affect positive change, which how do you think journalist reporting or lack thereof can affect how history is marked and remembered for years to come? I know one of my biggest classes I took in college was journalism, persuasion, and public opinion. Can you just kind of talk about how your word will affect positive change to come?
Well, sometimes it's hard to gauge. There is work I've done that has led to immediate action. Like I wrote a piece in Kansas City on a private Catholic school that led to the president of the school leaving because there was rampant racist culture going on at the school.
Gotcha.
And then recently when I wrote my column, America is Burning at the Boston Globe, there is an online school that's based here. I can't remember the name right now, but they quoted it in an email to their students saying that they would be changing some school policies. So it's like, that's a way like someone reads what you're writing and they're like, we need to figure out how this applies to us and how we can create policies from that. There's people I've written about that become further amplified and get better opportunities because I've profiled them, because maybe Greater Boston doesn't know their name. And then I say like, oh, look at this awesome person and the thing they're doing. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, I want that person on the panel. I want this person on my cover. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and then it's little things like people reading your work and saying, I never thought of it that way. You know, I've had readers say, you know, I never thought of it that way. And to me, that means a lot. Like to have someone say, I never thought about it like that, and start thinking different. It's those little changes of mind, those little like aha moments for people that are like, yo, you're right. Like, or, and it's not even about being right. It's like, I see the humanity in this situation. I hear you. I am open to the possibility of talking about this in a different way. You know, it's really interesting. And sometimes you think that you're making a difference and you're not making a difference at all. I mean, I've literally been writing about the things that we are seeing happen right now since Trayvon Martin was murdered. And I'm hearing so many people act like this is so brand new. And it's very hard to hear. It's very hard for me to hear people say like, oh, I didn't know it was this bad, when we've been knowing it was always this bad. Like, I don't like using Trayvon Martin as a marker, but I use him because he's a marker in like the era of social media. Mm-hmm. But this has been going on for hundreds of years. There's like Richard Pryor clips and Paul Mooney clips and clips that predate our birth, right, that talk about these things. And, you know, Emmett Till, like, these are things that our parents and grandparents were alive for. Like, people who were alive during the civil rights movement are still alive now. So it's like weird how we talk about these things as if they're so long ago. Like, they aren't. They're not that long ago. Everyone from the civil rights movement, not everyone, like lots of people have died, but I'm just saying like a lot of them are here. They remember the march. They did the march. John Lewis is here, like, right, to give us his knowledge. And we're seeing it happen, and it's happening on live TV. Like, there's police brutality happening at the anti-police brutality protests. And right. And it's crazy. It's just, it's hard to tell. Like, sometimes I look at journalism and journalists, and I especially look at the ones who've been doing it for decades and decades and decades. And I'm just like, wow, like, like, I feel tired, and I sometimes feel sad and weary. And I think about like the iconic Ida B. Wells, who, you know, she literally risked her life to write about lynchings. And, you know, she's gone now, she's not with us, but her work is. And it's sad because we're still witnessing lynchings. They're just not trees involved. Right. And it's even sadder that we're so often only willing to talk about it as police brutality. And I'm like, it's not just police brutality. Like, it's in spaces where there's not enough men to women in them ratio, where everyone's white and there's like 3 people of color in the office, where there is no bilingual employees. Like, there's just so many every facet of American life is affected by inequities. And until we start talking about these things without being defensive, it's just, I'm not sure how I can like write us into it, or how anyone can write us into it. It's like, okay, it's like no one person can do it. But if I even am getting one person to say, yeah, I thought about that differently, then that to me makes an impact.
Awesome. And that's a perfect segue into like, how do you think we as individuals can create change? We talked about what businesses can do, but what would you tell me to do to start creating change, supporting this movement, both for me and for the audience?
You just start. Like, everyone thinks that they have to be some fully formed woke individual. None of us were born woke. All those people you see on the internet shaming everyone else, like, they weren't always woke. This is a process. I'm still learning things. I'm still figuring out how to hold space for all types of people, to all types of folks. Like, there's so much for all of us to learn. And I think particularly for white people, there's this fear of saying and doing the wrong thing. But if your biggest fear is looking bad, then I question your motives. Like, are your motives to help change the world and help change your community and help change the culture? Or are your motives to look good? Because we're all going to falter. We're all going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. Like, we're not always going to look good. This is an uncomfortable and ugly process because it's an uncomfortable and ugly system. So you gotta just start. You gotta do the research. Google is your friend. Like, don't put the labor on your friends of color and your friends in marginalized communities that you want to help. And that goes for people of different marginalized communities. Like, I can't call my queer friends and say, hey, do all this work for me. You know, I have to start like doing the readings and looking at the history and giving props to Marsha P. Johnson. Like, you know, there's a learning process. So it's like, you have to learn, but you can start. You can start and learn as you go, and just be humble enough to know that, yeah, sometimes you're going to make a mistake and someone's going to call you out. And instead of saying, well, I was just trying, say, thanks. I'll do that research, or, you know, I got that wrong. I'm going to figure that out. But if we're all just trying to stand around and be perfect about it, nothing's going to get done. It's part of that is why we're still doing this.
Awesome. So I'm going to open it now for questions. If anybody has anything, please type it in the chat box. But I guess while we're waiting to see if anybody has anything, could you give us the 3 biggest takeaways from what you've spoke with us today? You've covered a lot and it's been wonderful. And I know, you know, I had a couple of those aha moments throughout it that you mentioned earlier myself. But if you want us to leave with 3 or 4 of the biggest things today, what would those be?
Everybody plays a part, no matter how big or small. Everyone plays a part. Mm-hmm. Don't be scared, be prepared.
I like that.
And it's not to say that like I said, I'm scared all the time. Like, I don't like the idea that you have to be fearless. You're going to have fear, but push through it, and you push through it by being prepared, by learning, by being humble, by being ready to face uncomfortable truths. Lead with love. I heard Cornel West I was in a class that Cornel West spoke to, and he said, everybody wants to be leaders, but nobody wants to be lovers of the people. And if we don't start loving each other as a people, and understanding that justice is a love language and equity is a love language, you know, reappropriating funds in economic justice, those are all love languages. Like, everyone thinks of love in this glossy way that's just like, oh, I don't see color and hold my hand in harmony. No, love is like justice. Love is equity. Love is like, let's move forward in a way that allows us to never have to see someone murdered for 8 minutes and 46 seconds crying for their mom again.
Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions, except for, you know, thank you for doing this. It's been an honor to speak with you today. I can't thank you enough for coming and speaking to Workbar Live, and speaking with me. I know that it was powerful for me. I'm sure that it was for everybody else here. We will be posting some recap moments on this on our blog. And I'll also be sending out a survey email for our guests. I will make sure to include your Twitter account handle in there. I highly suggest looking at it. Oh, looks like we might have one. Just more feedback. You're amazing. Thank you for doing this from some of our attendees. So, and she's right. You are amazing. Thank you for doing this. You're very brave, and I loved hearing all of your stories. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I hope that we can work together again.
Yeah, me too. I really hope so. It's been wonderful to connect. Thank you so much again.
My party word would be, don't forget to live. you know, we're in 2 pandemics. You know, racism is America's original pandemic and the coronavirus. And I think people think that they can't smile anymore or have fun anymore. And I just want to say, as we do this important work in this next chapter of the revolution, that joy is a form of resistance too. So, and so is rest. Follow the NAP ministry on Instagram. You know, I want everybody to be very civic-minded, active citizens and help make us live in a better community, in a better state, in a better country. But the system functions to keep you tired and weary and sad. And I want you to be mad enough to create change and love people enough to know revolution is needed. But I also think it's important to be rested and to have joy and love in your heart. So, and you know, I've got my dog with her squeaky wine bottle and toy brie. So
Right. Right?
I just, you know, I don't mean to end off flower chowdy, but I do want people to remember, like, there's many pieces of resistance going on at once.
Yeah. Awesome. Again, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye, but that was awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.